The rain fell like a dense curtain over the city. It blurred the lights of the street lamps, drew silvery streaks across the windshields of waiting cars, and made people walk faster, as if they could escape the drops that stabbed down from the sky. Like needles, for Daniel Weber, 38, single father and mechanic, it was an evening like any other. He had worked late, too late, as always. The last customer had held him up with an engine problem he hadn't wanted to leave unresolved. His daughter Lena, 8 years old, was waiting at home in their small 2-room apartment, probably curled up on the sofa again, a picture book on her lap, the blanket half pulled over her. He turned the windshield wipers higher and turned into the wet side street he took every evening. The street was narrow, the houses old, crooked, with crumbling facades and windows that looked as if they hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in years. And then he saw her, a woman soaked through, without a jacket, her hair stuck to her face. She was staggering more than walking, holding onto a wall. Her movements were erratic, frantic, and every time a car rushed past, she flinched. Daniel immediately hit the brakes. What the? He looked around. No other car stopped. No one seemed to notice her. A cold stab shot through his chest. He grabbed the umbrella, jumped out of the car, and ran toward her. Are you all right? The woman lifted her head as he approached. Her eyes were red, swollen, full of fear, and at the same time empty, as if burned out. Blue bruises stretched across her neck. A small gash on her temple was bleeding. Daniel stopped, not out of fear, out of shock. Oh God, you're bleeding. He raised his hands slowly so she wouldn't feel threatened. The rain poured between them as if it had deliberately drawn a wall of water. I won't hurt you, okay? I just want to help. The woman staggered back a step. No, please, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I can't. I have to keep going. You don't have to do anything. You just don't need to freeze. Daniel opened his umbrella over her. What happened? Then something broke in her. No screaming, no dramatic collapse. Just a silent, trembling intake of breath that sounded as if the world was crushing her. He did. She began, but the words choked. Daniel knew what she wasn't saying. He had seen such injuries before, in the workshop, with neighbors, with female customers who said they had fallen, even though their eyes told a different story. Come, please. He pointed to his car. I'll drive you to the hospital. Then she suddenly grabbed his wrist tight, panicked. No, not to the hospital. Her voice broke. He'll find me. He always finds me. The fear in her eyes hit him deeper than he had expected. All right, Daniel said calmly, then we'll go somewhere else, somewhere where you're safe. I don't know any place. Yes, he replied. Now you know me. The decision as he helped her get into the car, he saw the imprint of a large hand on her upper arm. His stomach contracted painfully. This was no argument. This was no accident. This was violence, systematic, brutal violence. She was trembling all over, pulled her knees to her chest, as if she were only a shadow of herself. What's your name? He asked carefully as he started the engine. A moment of silence. Then, Mira. Okay, Mira. I'm Daniel. He drove off slowly. Don't worry, you're safe. She said nothing, but he saw in the rearview mirror how her shoulders sank minimally. Just a breath, but enough to know she wanted to believe he was right. A home for one night. When Daniel unlocked the apartment door, warm light spilled into the hallway. Lena immediately ran toward him laughing, but stopped abruptly when she saw Mira. Papa, who is that? Daniel knelt down briefly to her. That's Mira. She needs our help today. Lena was empathetic like hardly any other child. She just nodded seriously and said, Do you want cocoa? And for the first time, Mira lifted her head, surprised. A tiny spark of life appeared in it. Daniel brought her to the living room, got her fresh clothes from his deceased sister, the only thing that would even come close to fitting. When Mira came back from the bathroom, she didn't look healthy, not whole, but she at least looked less lost. She held tightly to one of the cups Lena had brought her. Daniel sat down on the chair across from her. Mira, do you want to tell me what happened? She breathed shallowly. My husband. She began, and then the truth rolled through the room like a cold storm. Not all at once, piece by piece, fragments of a life no one should have had to endure. Daniel listened to her without pressing her. When she was finished, he knew that nothing about this evening had been coincidence. A spark of hope. Lena had long been asleep. Mira sat on the sofa, knees drawn up, a blanket over her shoulders. I don't know where to go, she whispered. If I go back, he'll kill me. If I stay, I'll endanger you. Daniel shook his head. I won't let you go back, not to that animal. She looked at him not with hope, but with deep exhaustion. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. Daniel took a deep breath. Because my wife, he began. But he didn't finish the sentence, because the memory still hurt, because no one deserves to be treated like that. No one. Tears ran down her cheeks. Quietly, shamelessly, liberating. Then she said the sentence that would change his whole life. Thank you, Daniel. I wouldn't have survived tonight. The shadow behind the light while Mira had finally fallen asleep, Daniel sat in the dark at the kitchen table. He thought about everything, her injuries, her fear, the man who was somewhere out there and would be looking for her. He felt that this evening wasn't simply over, that the story had just begun, and he didn't even remotely suspect what tremendous surprise would shake his own life in a few weeks. Story 2. Ethan and Amber. The silence that settled over the house in the following days was not empty. It was heavy, permeated with unspoken truths and the cutting coldness of disappointment. I moved through the rooms like a shadow, watched as Amber tried to create small waves of normalcy, a forced smile here, a quiet joke there, and recognized that none of it could erase the past. Each of her steps echoed like an echo of the decisions she had made. I continued my routine. Every morning, the same ritual. Coffee on Sycamore Avenue, notebook open, thoughts collected, studying the emptiness between us. I didn't write about her, I wrote about myself, about the merciless clarity that spread within me as I realized I was no longer waiting for the version of Amber I had once loved. I was waiting for a truth she had never fully given me. One evening, as the sky transformed into dark indigo and purple, she ventured another attempt. She stood at the door to the living room. The light cast long shadows across her shoulders, and for a moment she seemed to waver, between fear and the hope that everything might still be repairable. Ethan, she began, her voice trembling, can we talk, please? I made her wait, silently, as I had done the last few days. I let her feel the silence she herself had created. Then slowly I turned to her and said, talk, yes, but this time without evasions, without half-truths. I want to know who you are now, not the Amber you once were, the one you are now. She lowered her gaze, tears stood in her eyes, and I saw the cracks in her facade. It wasn't a dramatic breakdown, but a quiet admission, the only one I could allow. She spoke of loneliness, of the feeling of being invisible, of Michael, and I listened, not as a judge, but as a man who recognized that love and trust are equally destructible. I finally asked her myself. I wanted clarity that wasn't filtered through words, but through reality. I wanted the details, the real moments, the tangled threads of her infidelity. When she said his name, I felt the cold steel of disappointment within me. Michael. I repeated it quietly in my thoughts. Let the weight of the name sink until it formed a kind of sober reality. The next morning I had made the decision, not in anger, not in revenge, but in the quiet certainty that some bridges are permanently destroyed. I packed not hastily, not dramatically, but methodically, as if I were cleanly packing every memory, every hope I had seen in her into boxes. Then I left, not for confrontation, not to flee simply away, into the clarity I owed myself. Amber remained behind, helpless and distraught. Her attempts to make contact fizzled against the wall of my resolve. Every message, every call was ignored, because the only thing I needed was silence, not as punishment, but as protection. The world outside my house was quiet. My steps led me into the spaces I myself had chosen, to places that weren't permeated by her lie. As the days passed, I began to redefine life. Small routines became refuges. Coffee, notebook, observations of the world, people whose stories were unadulterated and genuine. I learned that peace doesn't have to be loud, that freedom lies not in struggle, but in letting go. I began to see the world again with open eyes, without shadows of deception that had once filled every corner of my house. I never heard from Amber directly again, Only stories from acquaintances, from neighbors who whispered that she was working in the countryside, that she was isolating herself. Her life had turned in a way I couldn't influence, which, however, revealed the consequences of all her decisions. And me, I found a space for myself in which silence was not emptiness, but the first real form of peace I had felt in years. The freedom to breathe, to observe, to exist without the constant expectation of betrayal became my luxury. I returned to my small life, to my coffee routines, to my thoughts. I wrote, not to remember, not to avenge, but to understand, to heal, to find myself. The scars remained, but they were no longer chains, but signs that I had survived, that I was myself again. And so it ended, not with great drama, not with a loud finale, but with quiet confirmation. I was free, and the truth, unadulterated, clear, unshakable, had prevailed. Everything else, everything Amber had done, collapsed on its own, without me having to support or destroy it.